Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. The area of afterlife-related information is so broad and so deep that there are many ways we can approach it. And we can live full and fulfilling lives and be very happy and do all sorts of wonderful things for people, just teaching a tiny part of serving and helping others in the afterlife field. And our guest today spends a lot of his time teaching a part of it, which is actually not so happy. I don't do well in this area, so I'm so glad to have him here. He can teach me as well as he's teaching you to talk about grief. I do terribly in the area of grief because, frankly, I love every part of talking about death, and we can talk about that today as well. Our guest today grew up in the Pentecostal religious tradition, and then he went into the evangelical community, and after that became a Christian. He became a Christian Universalist. Wasn't happy with Christianity, went on to study Buddhism and other mystical traditions, and he says that he was pretty deeply scarred by toxic religion, which a lot of us can identify with that, and he actually developed a fear of death, and it made him enter a lifelong spiritual quest, which, again, many of us can identify with that. And he was living a really beautiful life. My wonderful friend, Brian Smith, he's a personal friend of mine, as well as being in this field with me. But he and his wonderful wife of now nearly 30 years and his two beautiful young daughters had a crisis actually happen to them in June of 2015 when his younger daughter, Shayna, and she truly, you'll see the picture, she's beautiful, unexpectedly transitioned in her sleep. She was just 15 and a half years old. After Shayna's transition, Brian's spiritual quest really intensified, prompted by some visions and messages he began to get from her. That relieves you very much when you start to hear from someone that you love who's transitioned. But also it really intensifies your research. You want to know what's going on. And he did that research, and he learned so much that he wrote a book called Grief to Growth. There's a 2 in there, Grief to Growth, Planted, Not Buried. He now shares all that he learned as a teacher, as a grief counselor, and he works with the wonderful organization Helping Parents Heal. Brian, welcome. I'm so happy to have you back with us. He's only been with us once before, and all the time I've known him, and that surprised me, and it surprised him too. So I'm glad to have you back, Brian.
Well, thanks for having me, Roberta. It's so great to see you again.
It's funny. Some of the people that I actually feel closest to kind of emotionally, I haven't had on my program very much because, life goes so fast and we're so busy doing all our stuff that we kind of don't do this. So I'm very happy, especially since I very seldom talk here about grief, and you're someone who knows about grief. So lay it on us. Talk about grief today.
Yeah, happy to do that. First, I need to make one slight correction. My wife had been married 34 years this past, 2 days ago. We just celebrated our 34th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
But in terms of grief, it's a really interesting thing because my book is titled.
And everyone see behind him, isn't she beautiful? That's Shayna.
Yeah, it's my daughter Shayna. So, grief, it's always different. It's different. It's any kind of loss that we might have. And it can be a loss of a person or a relationship or a pet or, anything. And it always hits us differently. So I had lost, before my daughter Shayna transitioned, my grandmother passed away when I was in my 20s. My grandmother was in her, I think, late 70s or early 80s. And that hits you one way, right? But then when your daughter transitions, as you said, and they're a child still. She was 15 years old, living in our house, going from 9th grade into 10th grade. It hits you totally differently. And even though I had studied about the afterlife, and you talked about, all the religious things I'd been through, and I was on the spiritual path, and I'd been reading books by Dr. Gary Schwartz and Bruce Grayson and all these people. So I had a really confidence that we do continue. But when you lose a child, you want to know what you want to know. Where are they? You, as a parent, you want to be with your children, and to have that separation and not to be able to be with them, not to be able to protect them, it really intensified that grief. And so I went through and still go through the grieving process. But one thing I will say is I believe that when we grieve in basically two ways, two parts. We grieve the perceived loss that our loved one has, that they're not living life anymore, that they've somehow lost out on something. And then we grieve for ourselves. We grieve our loss of their physical presence. Well, with Shayna, I was fortunate enough to know that Shayna wasn't missing out, that Shayna was still okay, that she was happy, she was healthy, she was whole. She did have some health challenges when she was in the body, and I knew that those were over. So I didn't have that aspect of grief. So we grieve, but we grieve differently. And it softens the grief, I will say. It doesn't take it away, but it does soften it.
Okay, well, so, but my problem with grief, and I think it's a problem a lot of people have who work in our field, is that I don't grieve at all. I mean, I've had people die that I felt very close to. I didn't cry. When my mother died, I didn't cry. I felt very happy for her. She was out of that awful old body and free. And I talked with her through a medium, and I was absolutely right that she was free. Not only that, she's a more elevated being even than I thought she was. So she'd like to travel when she was here. And whoa, is she traveling now? She is going all over the place and having so much fun. And so how can you be sad for someone like that? I know I'll see her soon, but meanwhile, I'm having fun here. She's having fun there. Oh, everyone's having fun. Where's the grief? I don't have any grief at all. I don't understand grief. I get emails from people almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Eeyore the donkey. They're going, "Well, I'm so sad. This is so bad." And I'm thinking, what is wrong with you?
Mm.
So I'm a lousy grief counselor. I don't know what to say to people.
Yeah.
And you're doing it, though. This is one of the things you do. How do you make yourself sad for them?
Well, this is the thing about being human. We're living in two roles at the same time. We're spiritual beings, but we're living in a biological body, and we are biological beings. And our biology does have an effect on us. Now, we can work to get to the point where you are, and that's great. That's an aspiration, but most of us aren't there. And I really wonder. I have to be very careful with my language, but there's something called spiritual bypassing, where we suppress the human part of ourselves, and we say, I don't have certain feelings, or certain feelings are bad. So what I try to do is meet people where they are and give people permission to feel however they feel. Now, I was counseling a couple who had lost a grandchild suddenly. They were taken away by violence. And they were very, very deeply Christian. And, and the one said, well, the Bible tells me that I should not be sad, that I should never be angry, that I should never have these feelings. And the other, the spouse was like, I am angry. I am questioning. I am wondering. And I'm like, it's okay to have those quote unquote negative feelings. And I look to Jesus I know you're a huge fan of Jesus, and I don't call myself a Christian anymore, but I do call myself a follower of Jesus.
I'm not a Christian, but right. I'm a real big friend of Jesus. Yeah,
exactly. And my thing is, I look to him as an example, and the shortest verse in the Bible and one of the most impactful for people is Jesus wept. So I figure if Jesus could mourn, if Jesus wept, then who am I to think that I can never have those feelings? And there's debate. Well, did Jesus weep because he was sad? Was he sad for the family? Was he sad? Well, he was sad, and he wept.
He had feelings. for sure, and he still does. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another woman that really, really helped me, Dr. Mary Neal. And after Shana passed, I was listening to her experience, her near-death experience and subsequent experiences. And when she had her experience, she went into heaven. She saw Jesus. She saw how everything works out, all this stuff. And then she was told, your son is going to transition early, like at the age of around 18. I think he was 19 when he was hit and killed in a car accident. And she went through the grieving process. And I thought, if she could go through the grieving process, someone who's been to the other side, who's talked with Jesus, who is told this is going to happen, and has been told it's all laid out, it's all part of the plan. If she can grieve, then it's okay for me to grieve. And the thing about these emotions that we go through, the grieving process, it actually can be a way of helping us grow. It can make us stronger. It can make us more resilient. It can make us more empathetic. There are all these benefits that can come from the grieving process. So I try to help people go through that process with as much growth and as little pain as possible.
Yes, I don't see anything wrong with grieving. If it's what feels right to someone, that's okay. I'm not disparaging feelings if people have those feelings. My problem is that I never have that feeling, so I can't identify with it because I feel only joy for the person who is, I know where they are. I know how it feels to be there. And I know how much fun they're having now, especially people who have been sick, who have been in pain,
Sure.
have been, who have had negative feelings in their material body. I cannot grieve them because I know they're happy now. If someone is young, if someone is, say, not sick, even if they're 45 or 50 and they were not sick and then they were in a car accident and they had children or whatever, and they had a beautiful life here and suddenly they don't have that now. Yes, I could grieve them because they have a real loss here. They were wrenched out of a life here that they loved. Oh, I could identify with that negativity. And when Jesus wept, it was because someone was wrenched out of a life or seemed to have been wrenched out of a life that was rich and full. Yes, right. That was a sad thing for him to witness. But no, I think he's not really dead. He's only somewhat dead. There was a movie where someone
Princess Bride.
Yes.
Mostly dead. He's mostly
dead, but not quite dead. Yes, that made Jesus sad to think of that.
Sure.
But
well, and you just hit on
but do you see what I'm seeing? Do you see the difference?
You hit on a really important point. Now, my mother-in-law, I'm fortunate enough, I'm 63 and both my parents are still here. So I don't know what parent loss is like, but I was very, very close to my in-laws and I watched both of them go through dementia and lose who they were before they made the transition.
Oh, yeah.
And my mother-in-law said for years, I can't wait to just go be with Felton. And when at the end, she wasn't who she was and he wasn't who he was. And I knew that they both would like to be released from that. Now, when they transitioned, I shed very few tears because I was happy for them. Right. I miss them here, but I know that she wanted to be there. So yeah, I'm extremely happy for her. So, but it's different. Again, every loss is different when it's a 15-year-old girl who's living in your home and,
oh my goodness,
and you're looking forward to her going into 10th grade and high school and marriage and all those things. Again, not so much her loss, even though I felt that at first, but my loss of those experiences.
Oh yeah.
And I'll never forget, you introduced me to Suzanne Wilson, and the first reading I had was with Suzanne. And she said something like, I see car keys. Now, Shana was 15 and a half. And in Ohio, you can get your temps at 15 and a half. She was a few weeks away from starting to drive, and she was really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And when Suzanne said that to me, she goes, my understanding now is we can do those things, in heaven. So she was
Oh,
saying,
sure, big time.
I think Shayna has, got her driver's license, got a car, whatever. But yet again, most people don't have the level of not even understanding that you and I have, the level of acceptance of what life is about. They don't see the big picture of life. They think this is life. And
Oh, yeah.
even religious people, even Christians, we pay lip service to the afterlife. Yeah, I know I'm going to go to heaven in the by and by. And I remember when I was a kid and we were talking about, heaven. I'm like, well, if heaven's so great, how come nobody wants to go? Shouldn't we all be, like looking forward to getting
But
out of here?
they think they're going to sit in a throne room singing praise to God eternally,
Yeah,
with a harp. Nobody
it
wants to
sounded
do
like
that,
torture to me.
please.
Yeah. My mother, I'll never forget, my mother would take some things pretty literally. And the Bible says, like, the streets are overflowing with milk and honey and the streets of gold. And my mother's like, gold sounds really gaudy to me. And I don't like milk and I don't like honey. So I don't want to
Well,
go
that's
there.
it. See,
Yeah.
people think it's going to be like a religious uh,
Right.
heaven. Well, the
Right.
reality is nobody's religious there at all. There's no religious practice to the heaven.
Right. Right. So
And
this
so it's
understanding
just
that we
nothing but
have.
fun.
Yeah. So this understanding that we have, it really does help. I mean, it helps a lot.
Oh,
But again,
yeah.
it doesn't alleviate all of it. A young woman who's raising small children that gets hit by a car or gets breast cancer or something and is ripped away from her children.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is sad. That
That's
is
sad. That's terrible.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those people are going to grieve even if you do have an understanding that they're in a better place. It's a again, you can be happy for them and also be sad for yourself at the same time.
Hmm. That's right. That's very true. How did you get involved with helping your parents heal? Did you just sort of find them?
It's I've learned in life there's synchronicities
Oh,
that
big
just
time, all
happen.
the time.
So, I'm really big on the internet. I was on Facebook and someone said, you should call this guy Mark Ireland. He
Yes.
lost his son. He might be able to help you. And I reached out to Mark and then I found out that he was one of the co-founders of Helping Parents Heal.
Yeah. That was
He
right
he
about
worked with
that
me.
time. Actually, it was when they were really getting going.
Yeah. And then my daughter Kayla said, because we always went to the beach with the girls. I loved going to the beach. And it was the next vacation we are going to plan. The first one where Shayna wasn't going to be with us physically. And she said, I don't want to go to the beach. That was our thing with Shayna. I want to go let's go to the opposite. Let's go to the desert. So we're like, so we went to Phoenix. And we were, we made the arrangements to go to Phoenix. And that's when I found out Elizabeth Boisson, who's the other co-founder of Helping Parents Heal, lives in Phoenix. So we got together and had breakfast with her, and she told us a little bit more about the organization and decided to get involved. This was only, I think it was a little bit less than a year after Shayna had passed. And, just it's a great organization. It's helped me tremendously. And
It really is very good. I think it handles the whole topic with such grace, positivity. It just hits just the right note. I've recommended it to so many people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's funny because when we first started out, we're still working with the language because language is really, really important. And I think we had something about bereaved parents in our mission statement. And Elizabeth, that we don't like the word bereaved. It's like because it sounds like a lifelong sentence or whatever.
Yes.
So we actually use the term shining light parents now.
Yes. Yes.
So it's been very, very helpful, and I love helping people make the shift from that deep grief where you feel like there's no hope and you don't even want to walk the planet anymore to somewhere closer to where you are, where it's like, yeah, death is not the end. Death is not something to be feared. I didn't really lose. The physical presence is no longer with us. I mean, I'll never forget. I was talking with the grief counselor when Shayna first passed, and she said, when people use language like, passed away or fell asleep or whatever, I realize that they're not really accepting. They're in denial about the death. I like when people use the word death. And I don't use the word death often, but I do acknowledge there is a death of our biological body. The biological body does cease to function and literally falls apart. It just disintegrates. So there is that, but that's not who we are. And so the spirit goes on. So what we do is that relationship with our loved one who's gone into spirit, it changes, it transitions. Like when you have a child that becomes an adult, as a parent,
Right.
your relationship with them changes. When my child passed into spirit, my relationship with her changes. So I have to adjust to the fact that I no longer have her physically, but I have her here in a different way.
Yeah, that's why I use the term transitioned when people, die because
Hmm. Hmm.
they transition out of their this body into a spiritual body. And but one of the things I get their emails still as if I think they somehow have me on a list, which I like, and they will often have meetings. Somebody gives a talk, and then they say, bring a picture because we'll have time to talk about your children. And so I envision them sort of going around the room talking about their children, showing the pictures to one another, which I think
Hmm.
is kind of nice.
Yeah.
That's what they do, and it's very pleasant. I
Yeah,
think.
it is. So as I said, it's really, I was talking with someone the other day. We were talking about like rituals when someone passes away, and I won't even say what someone was doing with the cremains, with the ashes. But one of the things that for me I had to let go of was that Shayna is her physical body because it's a very natural thing to say this person, this is that person is. So we have to make decisions when a person transits. What are we going to do with the body? Are we going to cremate the body? Are we going to bury the body? And I say that very deliberately, not cremate the person or bury the person because we don't cremate people, but
Just the body, right?
it's the body. So for us, we said we don't want to be attached to Shayna's physical body. We don't want to have a place to go where we feel like it's
Right,
buried. So we had her body cremated.
right.
And that for me, that was a decision that works for us because that allows me not to be connected to that and to understand that, we talked about the term graduated. I read a book many years ago and the term this guy used was risen. He called the people that transition risen. And I love that term because when people have their NDEs, they'll say, I looked back and my body was lying there and I rose above my body and I looked back up on my body. So try when you think about your loved one transitioning, yeah, their body falls down, but they immediately rise up. They're not there. When you go to the mortuary, you look at their body or you see that body in the casket, that's not who that person is.
Yeah, I recommend to people that they think about cremation too, and then go scatter the ashes somewhere because otherwise there's like some place where that person's body is forever in the ground, and you always think of them as there, and they aren't
Right.
emphatically there. And many people who have in fact transitioned will thank their family for having cremated the body so they don't have to think about it. This sort of remains still in the ground. They don't have to feel tied to that. They're so free of that. I'm
Yeah.
there. That isn't me at all. So,
Yeah. They'll come through in readings and they'll tell the person through a medium, they'll say, when you go to the cemetery, it's fine. I go with you, but you don't have to go there to see me.
right.
And I know people that have gotten really attached to that grave site and go there literally every day, or go there
Yeah,
often thinking that this is the way I'm honoring my loved one, and they're with you. They're with
yeah,
you, and
all the time.
yeah, all
Yeah.
the time. So that's just one of the things that helps for me to not be attached to that. And my poor mother-in-law, we used to talk about like what we're going to do with their body, after she transitioned. She said, "Well, don't burn me up, because don't." And I'm like, "Well, that's horrible, but isn't it worse to be in a casket?" So,
Yeah. I mean, I would think it'd be worse to be stuck in the ground forever.
right, right, and the truth is, of course, it's neither. We are when our body falls down, our spirit rises up.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. My goodness. But do you enjoy counseling people about death? Do you find that it helps you with your thinking about your daughter, or is it? I mean, I really don't like talking about all of that because it seems to me that it's the sooner we can help people to think about their own lives and get back to their own lives, the better. Or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I really do enjoy what I do. And it's interesting because sometimes people will say, and I'm not a hospice worker, but people will talk to people like hospice work. How do you do that work? Or how do you work with people that are sad all the time? Doesn't that make you sad? And it's actually the opposite. It's like, usually when I get on with somebody, in the beginning of the meeting, they'll be sad, they'll be crying, and that's all fine. But by the end of our hour, almost always, it seems like something's been lifted from them. And I enjoy bringing that people to feel, or that feeling to people. And I do know, because of what I've been through, I know what it's like to be in those early phases. And it helps me to be able to share with them the hope that I have and the hope that I have for them. So I find it, yeah, I love it. I love doing that. I love, talking to people about those things and helping to open their eyes, because it's important to have hope. But I also, my viewpoint, or my way of looking at things, is I'm a very rational person. I'm very scientific. I'm very, so I don't, when people use the word belief, I kind of cringe a little bit, because I heard that so much, growing up. Just believe, just believe. It's all about faith. There's a ton of evidence for what you and I believe. It's not wishful thinking.
True.
Yeah, it's not wishful thinking.
So
it's not woo woo. And I love being able to tell people, I'm not asking you to believe anything. Let me show you. As Jesus said to Thomas, when Thomas said, how do I know it's you? And he said, stick your hand in my side and feel the nail marks in my hand. Jesus,
right.
Jesus never, he didn't say he didn't condemn Thomas. What's funny, because we call him Doubting Thomas, and like it was a bad thing, but Thomas was like, show me. And Jesus said, yeah, okay, I'll show you. So I think it's important to use your brain, to be rational about things, to look at, what's the most likely answer here. Occam's razor, in science, it says, usually the simplest answer is the right answer. Yeah. But understand that there is evidence that what the materialists tell us is wrong. What's true is there's no evidence for materialism. There's no evidence that everything.
Right, let's say that again. There is no evidence for materialism.
Materialism is a belief system. It is a belief system, and they want to say that what we think is a belief system. But materialism is a belief system. They tell us to believe that in the beginning there was nothing, and out of this nothing, something miraculously appeared. This point at the Big Bang. Okay, well, where did that come from, right? If everything is cause and effect,
Big Bang,
right?
Has anyone been able to explain that to you, my dear?
They have not. It's like in any belief system, or any system, you have to have some assumptions, right? So they start with the assumption that there was a singularity, and I say that takes more faith to believe than what we're living in is consciousness.
Right.
And it's not all about the material. It's not all about physical cause and effect. That what we live in is, as you say all the time, is derivative. The material is derivative of consciousness, not the other way around. There's zero evidence that consciousness arises from the brain. That is an assumption based on materialism.
Yeah, that is so true. It is preposterous to believe that consciousness arises from the brain. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. Thank you for saying that, my dear.
Mm-hmm.
And I just watched yet another presentation from IONS. I feel so bad for them. International Organization of Noetic Sciences, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're an exalted group of scientists. And everything they do is nonsense, because they are still trying to find a source of consciousness inside the human brain, and there is no such thing.
Yeah.
the brain is a receiver and transmitter, and we're very, very used to receivers and transmitters. Radios are receivers and transmitters.
Yeah. I would say that that's where the evidence points. It's interesting because again, they put the burden on people who believe in consciousness as primary. They put the burden on us. Prove it. And
Max Planck proved it. And who is he? He's the father of quantum physics.
Right. And I'm seeing the tables shift a little bit. I'm seeing more people like Bernardo Kastrup, holding their feet to the fire.
Right.
And others are coming along and saying, no. Let's flip this around. You show me the consciousness arises from the brain. Show me any evidence. And then I can show you things like remote viewing that shows you that consciousness is not local, evidentiary near-death experiences where people were outside their bodies and can describe to you something that happened, 1,000 miles away or around the world. Mediumship has been studied in laboratories. Psychokinesis. It's just on and on. All these consciousness phenomena have been studied and shown that they're real, and any one of them would break the idea that our consciousness is located in our brain. But you combine them together, and it's a very solid body of evidence.
How did you get so smart? But no, there are so many people who have done the same research you and I have done.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. And we've all come to the same conclusion. There's just no evidence for anything other than the fact that consciousness is primary. That's all this evidence proves. Consciousness is primary.
I think it's so fascinating. Again, I'm a chemical engineer, so I've studied science and stuff, and I was taught, well, this is the way it is. And then I think about it now and I'm like, for however long mankind's been on Earth, and we can debate how long that is, millions of years, 6,000 years, 10,000 years, whatever the number is.
Right.
Up until about 200 years ago, man knew that he was a spiritual being. That was the assumption that we were spiritual. Pretty much all cultures around the world, there were no materialists. This materialistic phenomenon arose about 200 years ago when, frankly, I think we got too full of ourselves and said, we've got it all figured out now. So we don't need spirit anymore.
Is that true? Is that really true?
Is what true?
What you're saying, that we always believed we were spiritual beings before?
Well, if you look at cultures around the world, I think, we can see back from, the caveman, they believed that in spirit. You look at any indigenous culture around the world, they believe in spirit. You look outside the Western culture, even today, a lot of what we call indigenous people now, they still believe in spirit without this quote unquote evidence, without having to prove it in a lab. This idea of materialism, atheistic materialism, I call it. I'd say it's a belief. It's a relatively new phenomenon. Even the early scientists, they studied the universe because they believed there was a creator, and this creator was an orderly creator, and we could learn about the creator by studying his creation. So yes, I absolutely believe that what I'm saying is true.
But matter, I guess I didn't think that, because matter is solid. We were believing our lying eyes and fingers.
Oh, I think that's a relatively new phenomenon. I think that's the last couple hundred years. Yeah, I do. I believe, because again, if you look at the Egyptians, whatever, you just name it, the American Indians, the Vikings, any culture around the world, people on the continent of Africa, they're all believe man and spirit, that we go on, that we come from the creation myths. They're like universal.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. I guess I gave us too little credit.
I believe it's a relatively new phenomenon that man came up with when, it's kind of like the Time magazine article that was like in the 70s. I think that, it's like God is dead. It's kind of like there's this idea that, because people tie what you and I believe in with this creator God, this white man on a throne in the sky. And I do believe and I think in a way it's like, well, we outgrew that. But then we threw the baby out with the bathwater, because we said, well, okay, all these stories in the Bible about talking snakes and, et cetera, et cetera. Those couldn't possibly be true. So therefore, there's nothing true in the Bible. There's that, I call it, again, tossing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. Well, the Bible is not necessarily true, but the evidence, the empirical objective evidence, all points to the primacy of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's scientific evidence, mind you. It's not, I mean, I was shocked. As I say, I just was curious. I got this flyer for this IONS presentation, and I thought, oh, how interesting. That'll probably be very cutting edge. I hadn't realized how far they were off the rails.
That's interesting.
They really, truly are still looking for a source of consciousness inside the human brain.
That materialistic mindset has really sunk in deeply in our culture. And that's the thing that I'm pushing back against. It's like, again, let's question our assumptions, because we've gotten so wrapped up in that, and we've allowed them to do that to us. So I'd say let's push back, and I'm really encouraged to see people pushing back. There's an old adage that science changes one funeral at a time, because
Max Planck said that.
Yeah,
the poor man. I mean, he was confident almost within his lifetime, or very soon thereafter. What he had discovered, which is that you cannot get behind consciousness. Everything everything we talk about, everything we posit as real, consciousness, you just can't get behind consciousness.
There's a whole group of those guys at the time. Planck and Einstein and Borg and Heisenberg. There was a whole group of them that were trying to get this message to people to wake us up. And I think to return to our actual roots.
Einstein in the end agreed.
Yeah.
In the beginning, he was doubtful, but before his death, he said, "Yeah, you absolutely are right."
Yeah. So, I think, again, I think it's a matter of, again, giving people permission to say, okay, this is not wishful thinking. This is not woo woo. This is where the evidence leads. This is where the science will lead, if we would allow it to, if we would just stop with these, silly assumptions. And all this to say, getting back to grief, to your point earlier, is because of this materialistic mindset, because we believe we're our bodies, because we believe we only have one life, when someone transitions, especially early, it's tragic, right? Oh, they only got 15 years on the planet, and I hear people now that have come through, like through mediums, et cetera, and they'll say, you know what? I was an infant, a baby that died as a miscarriage. That was all I needed. Or someone that says, I came in and I decided I was going to be handicapped in some way, for my growth and for the growth of the people around me.
Yes.
And that flips everything. You don't look at that person as like, oh, poor them. Oh, or you're such terrible luck that you had this child that could never speak. I've spoken with people that had children that could never speak, to say that was the greatest blessing that I've ever had. So it flips everything.
So amazing. Life is so much more complex and interesting than we can possibly imagine. And when we get to look at it through the eyes of, as you say, these wonderful beings, some of whom were never even born into the world, but we get to talk to them that way, and we get to hear their perspectives. It's so extraordinary. Oh my goodness. Brian, the world has so much to tell us that we don't even stop and listen to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so, we have to do this again, because we've come to the end of our time now. I just don't even want to stop talking to you.
We'll do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again. Oh, there were other things I wanted to ask you about. We never even got to. But no, this is a serious situation. This business of some of the most trusted institutions in our field just are so closed-minded they will not even listen. I was so upset about this. You know who Craig Hogan is. I sent him an email. I said, "You wouldn't believe what I just heard. These people, they're crazy." Blah, blah. And he said, I stopped even worrying about it. He thinks, I mean, he has stopped even caring. I mean, because we can't, you can't, until people are ready to listen, you can't talk to them. And he just, but there has to be a way to start to enlighten people. But he believes that we can't until, well, as Max Planck said, science advances by deaths. But we've had how many deaths? We've had, probably 4 generations anyway since Max died.
Yeah,
so, when is it going to happen? I don't know. But
I think we can't reach everybody on this side, and I don't know that we're meant to. I think that, some people just decide to go through this life and they're not going to be enlightened, and that's okay. Because the thing is, when I was a Christian, I had this pressure, right? Because you had to make your conversion before you died, or you were going to eternal damnation. Now that's pressure.
Well, we know there is no hell, so
right.
Therefore,
so if they don't wake up, that's their choice. It makes life a lot easier. It's like you're not gonna be damned if you don't, but you're gonna live a miserable existence if you don't.
The old Christianity, which Constantine created and Jesus had nothing to do with, that old Christianity is dying. They don't know Jesus. They never could possibly know Jesus because the religion was created not by Jesus, but by Constantine. So that's advancement. We're advancing by these little tiny steps.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. We are just taking baby steps, and God is in charge, and we have to accept the fact that we won't see the ending. We are just the servants. We have to accept that.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's philosophical. My friend Craig is about it. So I have to accept that, we won't see the ending. Actually, my guide Thomas tells me that too. Just do your little part, and that's all you get to do. So you'll get to see it from upstairs, he says. Yeah. So, okay. But no, we will definitely do this again. But
it was great to see you.
What do you want people to take away from our conversation today? This little part.
I want people to take away from the conversation is there's a bigger picture that a lot of us are missing, and to keep looking, keep seeking, keep growing, and don't be afraid of the answers.
Don't be afraid of the answers. And why is that? Why should we not be afraid of the answers?
Well, my experience, it's all good news.
It's all good news. I was hoping you'd say that.
And to go back to my earlier experience, again, when you're in a cult, they indoctrinate you with fear to not listen to outsiders. And so there are a lot of people that are afraid to listen to us because they've been told that they would be misled. And I just say, trust yourself, trust your heart.
Because it is all good news. That is so, so true. Oh, my dear friend, please consider yourself hugged.
Yeah, great to see you.
It's so good to see you too, my dear. Stay there because I just have to say goodbye to everyone, but then I want to have a few more minutes to talk with you. Oh, everyone, now I just have to find my notes again. I always keep losing my notes. Everyone, this has been, as you know, another adventure into trying to ever better understand what really is going on in reality. And my wonderful, wonderful friend, isn't it funny, all the time that Shana needed on Earth, she spent on Earth. And sometimes we don't really understand why. Has she ever told you why? I can't really stop talking to you quite yet. Has she told you why she was here for only 15 years with you?
No, not specifically. No.
Such a beautiful child. My goodness.
Yeah.
All right. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm very glad you could be with us today, everyone. I just love talking with Brian. Never forget, everyone, that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never end. And when you get that, when you really understand that, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, we're going to be talking with Douglas Grunther, who's the author of a new book with a fascinating title. It's called The Quantum and the Dreamer: Visionary Consciousness, AI, and the New Renaissance. It had a great synopsis, which I don't have in front of me. It's just out. I haven't yet read it. I can't tell you anything about it, but I remember reading the synopsis and I said, we've got to talk about this. So please join us next week. And by then I'll have read the book. We'll explore its mysteries together. This week we've been talking with my wonderful friend, Brian Smith. Actually, Brian D. Smith, because there are about 83 million Brian Smiths in the world, but only one Brian D. Smith. He's been with us for only the second, but not the last time. And he's an expert on helping people deal with grief and loss because he lost his beautiful, beautiful daughter, Shayna, when she was only 15 years old. And he had to understand where she had gone. He started studying the afterlife. He became an expert on that. And now he works with helping parents heal, and he helps a lot of parents heal. He has a beautiful daughter, another who has survived, a beautiful daughter now in spirit, a wonderful wife, Duana. And actually, he's a podcaster. You have a blog as well, don't you?
I do have a blog as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he does a lot of things to help people get to a deeper and deeper truth. And I think you're going to enjoy knowing him just as I do. So please continue to kind of look for him in our list. I think you're going to like knowing him as he comes back with and works with us again. Now, as you know, we also have Craig Hogan, who is often with us. He'll be coming back again very soon, and he works with Seek Reality Online. Now, we've talked about grief, but the other side of grief is the fact that you're not going to have to grieve anyone if you know as much as we know about the afterlife. Seek Reality Online is your one-stop resource to know everything about the afterlife. You're going to have to go there whether you like it or not, because we're all going there. I've had people tell me, I can't believe this. They tell me, I think I'll just blink out like a light. But you don't have that choice. Everybody is eternal. So go to Seek Reality Online, which is seekreality.com. Learn everything that we know about the afterlife. And then you aren't going to need to grieve. I'm sorry to say this, Brian, but you aren't going to need to grieve either, because everybody you know who dies is going to be happy forevermore, just as you are. And of course, teachingsbyjesus.com is your best resource for all the divine truths that are brought to us in perfect love by the greatest teacher of them all, Master Jesus. Now it really is his turn. Now, I have books, but it's too late for me to tell you about them. And so just go to my website or go to, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or whatever, and you can get my books. And we have no time left. In fact, we've gone over. So meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all in this universe, you in particular, are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.